Your immune system is basically your own personal bodyguard, right? It's on duty 24/7. But what happens when that bodyguard gets a little overzealous? Today, we're going to dive into hypersensitivity. That's when your body's defenses go into complete overdrive and, believe it or not, start causing more harm than good. So let's kick things off with a little puzzle. Have you ever wondered about this? A bee stings you and it swells up almost instantly. But then you brush up against some poison ivy, and that nasty rash, it takes a day, maybe two, to even show up. They're both immune reactions. So what's the deal? Why are they on such completely different clocks? Well, we are going to find out exactly why. The official scientific term for all this is hypersensitivity. It just means an exaggerated immune response that kind of tragically ends up damaging our own body. And here's the absolute key. It can't happen the very first time you encounter something. Your immune system has to be primed or sensitized first. Think of it like an alarm that's been set and it's just waiting for the trigger. Now, to make sense of all this, we can thank a couple of immunologists named Gell and Coombs. Way back in 1963, they created a classification system that really acts as our roadmap. They sorted all of these overreactions into 4 distinct types based on how they work and how fast they happen. So let's think of these 4 types as the main characters in our story. Okay, first up is type 1. You probably know this one best. It's that immediate, classic, you know it when you see it, allergic reaction. The playbook for a type 1 reaction is like a 3-act drama. First, you've got sensitization. This is your first contact with an allergen, say pollen. It doesn't do much, but it primes your immune system. Second act, re-exposure. That same pollen comes back for another visit. This is the trigger, and that leads to the explosive third act, degranulation. Specialized cells called mast cells, which are now armed and ready, basically pull the pin and release a flood of inflammatory grenades like histamine. So what's actually happening on a cellular level? Well, after that first exposure, your body makes a special kind of antibody called IgE. These antibodies act like tiny little receptors, and they just coat the surface of your mast cells. Now, when the allergen comes back, it latches onto 2 of these Ig antibodies at once, creating a little bridge between them. That cross-link is the secret signal that tells the mast cell, okay, go time, and it just dumps its payload of histamine and other chemicals. And the result of this rapid-fire chemical release is, well, it's all too familiar, isn't it? The itchy eyes from hay fever, the constricted airways of asthma, are those hives you get from a food allergy. And in the most extreme cases, this can lead to life-threatening anaphylactic shock, and it's all happening within minutes to just a couple of hours. Now, where type 1 was all about a flood of chemicals, our second character, type 2, takes a much more direct and kind of personal approach. Its nickname is the cell destroyer, and trust me, it's for a very good reason. The key players here are different antibodies, this time IgG and IgM. But instead of targeting some foreign invader, they make a terrible mistake. They bind antigens that are directly on the surface of our own cells. In essence, the immune system is literally tagging its own team for destruction. And this destruction can happen in a few different ways. The antibodies can act like little eat-me signals, a process called opsonization, which marks the cell to be devoured by scavenger cells. Or they can trigger a chain reaction of proteins called complement, which literally punch holes in the cell, causing it to burst. Or they can just recruit natural killer cells to come in and deliver a fatal blow. It's pretty brutal. This image here shows that first mechanism, opsonization, just perfectly. You can see the antibodies swarming and coating the target cell. This coating acts like a big red flag for a scavenger cell, or phagocyte, which sees the tagged cell and simply engulfs and destroys it. It's a clean, efficient, and really tragic case of friendly fire. The real-world consequences of this are incredibly serious. This is exactly what happens when someone gets the wrong blood type in a transfusion. It's also the cause of certain autoimmune diseases where the body just starts destroying its own red blood cells or platelets. Okay, on to our third character, type 3. I like to call this one the rogue complex. It's a little bit like type 2, but there's a crucial twist that causes a whole different kind of collateral damage. So let's just nail down the difference here. In type 2, the antibody attacks an antigen that's physically attached to a cell. But in type 3, the antibody binds to a soluble antigen, one that's just floating freely in your blood or tissues. This creates this little floating clump called an immune complex. So the problem isn't a direct attack on one cell. It's all about where these rogue complexes end up. Because these complexes are just floating around, they can get stuck in the body's natural filters. I'm talking about tiny blood vessels in places like your kidneys, your joints, and your skin. It's kind of like sludge clogging up the plumbing. And once they're lodged there, they trigger a massive inflammatory response, calling in all these neutrophils that just release destructive enzymes and cause a ton of damage to the healthy tissue all around them. And this mechanism is behind a number of really tough chronic diseases. It's a key factor in autoimmune conditions like lupus, where these complexes can damage multiple organs, and rheumatoid arthritis, where they settle in the joints, causing that chronic inflammation and pain. And finally, let's meet our fourth and final character, type 4, the delayed attack. This one breaks all the rules we've just learned. It's slow, and it uses a completely different part of the immune army. So here is the most important thing to remember about type 4. Types 1, 2, and 3 are all mediated by antibodies. Type 4 is not. This reaction is entirely cell-mediated. It's run by T cells and the big scavenger cells they command, called macrophages. This is a fundamentally different game plan. So here's how it plays out. A sensitized T cell, which has seen the antigen before, recognizes it again. But instead of making antibodies, this T cell acts like a general, releasing these chemical signals called cytokines. These signals call in an army of macrophages to the area. The macrophages then get to work, releasing enzymes that cause all that local tissue damage and inflammation. But this whole recruitment process, it takes time. And that time delay, we're talking 48 to 72 hours, that is the absolute hallmark of type 4. This is that itchy, blistering rash from poison ivy or a nickel allergy. It's also the science behind the tuberculin skin test, where a positive reaction is that hard, red bump that doesn't show up for 2 or 3 days. So there you have it. The allergic reaction, the cell destroyer, the rogue complex, and the delayed attack. 4 totally distinct ways the immune system can misfire, but all part of the same incredibly complex story. And that brings us right back to our opening mystery. The bee sting, on the left, causes that immediate swelling because it's a super fast antibody-driven type 1 response. But the poison ivy on the right, that rash is a classic type 4 reaction. And it takes a couple of days to show up because the T cells have to slowly recruit and activate their cellular army right at the site. Mystery solved. This chart just puts it all together beautifully. Just look at the key differences. For antibodies, type 1 uses IgE. Types 2 and 3 use IgG and IgM. And then there's type 4, the rebel, using no antibodies at all, just T cells. Now look at the response time. Type 1 is incredibly fast, right? Just minutes. But follow that row across to type 4, and you see that massive delay, 48 to 72 hours. It's a perfect snapshot of each reaction's unique signature. You know, understanding these 4 pathways isn't just some academic exercise. It's fundamental to medicine. It helps us diagnose and treat everything from allergies to autoimmune disease. And it leaves us with a really hopeful question for the future. The more precisely we can map these incredibly complex reactions, can we develop smarter therapies to selectively dial them down, or maybe even turn them off without having to shut down our entire immune system? That's the challenge and the real promise of modern immunology.